Their seats. I know there's a lot of catching up that we're doing because there's a lot of old friends that we're connecting with and meet new friends. But we need to start the program. And I'll start to incentivize people to sit down. So I'm Dan Runde. I chair the SID-Washington Board of Directors. And I want to welcome you to the 2012 SID-Washington Gala dinner. And it's a great opportunity for the community to come together and recognize someone who has made a major contribution to making the world a better place. We have several past honorees here in the audience that I want to recognize. We have former Congressman Jim Colby, who is a previous honoree. We also have Aaron Williams, who's the immediate past director of the Peace Corps, who's also a former honoree. There he is. Please recognize Aaron Williams. But we also have some special friends from Bolivia who are with us tonight as well. We have the former ambassador, Ambassador Aparicio is here, if you could recognize him. Hello, Ambassador. But also we have the former First Lady of Bolivia, Mrs. Sanchez de Lozada, who's here as well. Where is Mrs. Sanchez de Lozada? If we could recognize her, please. Please recognize her with a round of applause. Great. I need to thank a number of people. In particular, I want to thank the SID Board of Directors. We really have a tremendous Board of Directors. And I want to thank the 55 sponsors that we have tonight. There have been some very generous financial sponsors this evening to make this event possible. And you'll hear about them a little bit later. But we are very, very grateful for all of your support. I want to also thank several people who worked very tirelessly to make this event happen. I want to thank Danielle Khalil. I want to thank Courtney Bjorgard. And I want to thank Elaine Potter in particular. Please recognize them. We had many other staff and volunteers, but these folks worked several weekends and many late nights to make this the success that it is. I also need to thank a couple of board members in particular. Our dinner chair tonight is Ignacio Jauregui, who you'll see a little bit later. We want to recognize Ignacio, please. I also want to thank Jean Gilson, who is not with us this evening, but did a lot of the heavy lifting to make this event possible, along with my friends Byron Radcliffe and Tessie San Martin in particular as additional board members who really did extra lifts to help make this a success. You're going to hear a lot about the honoree from others, but I just want to say how pleased we are to be honoring Maria Otero. She is someone who's a pioneer in microfinance. I think she helped make microfinance a household name. She's a practitioner, so this is a community of development practitioners, so it's really wonderful to be honoring a development practitioner. And I think she helped make private sector development, in broadly speaking, acceptable in a way that was accessible to many different people. But I also think what I find inspiring about her is her day job, that she is about expanding human freedom in democracy and governance in her day job as Undersecretary for Global Affairs every day at the State Department. So both economic opportunity and human freedom, I think, are two incredibly important parts of the development conversation that I'm interested in, that I focus on in my day job at CSIS. So I'm particularly pleased that we're honoring Maria Otero. So with that, I want to recognize to the podium my friend and colleague and the president of SID-Washington, Dana Cade, to hand over the rest of the duties for the evening. Dana. Okay.
Thank you, Dan. As Dan mentioned, this evening couldn't take place without the generous support of our sponsors. I'd like to recognize them, particularly the platinum, diamond, and gold level sponsors. So at the platinum level, we'd like to thank Abt Associates, Chemonics, Chevron, DAI, and IRD, International Relief and Development. At the diamond level, we'd like to thank Cardno, Emerging Markets, and at the gold level, AECOM, CH2M Hill, Creative Associates International, and Agility Corporation. So thank you to all of you. We got a chance to talk to a lot of you, but thank you again. Really appreciate it. I also want to, I know Dan already said that, but it bears repeating. I really want to recognize the contributions of the SID staff. It's a very small staff, but probably the best little staff around. So Courtney Bjorgard, Elaine Potter, and Danielle Khalil, I'm honored to work with such talented colleagues. And then I didn't want to miss the opportunity to announce that we'll be having our annual conference on June 6th at the SID-Washington Convention Center. So I hope all of you will join us then. We'll have some really interesting panels, some really great speakers, and we'll send out some more information about that. But hopefully you'll save the date now. It promises to be a really great event. So what we'd like to do now is kick off tonight's evenings with remarks from Michael Posner, who serves as the Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, a post he's held since 2009. Throughout his term as Assistant Secretary, he's engaged on a wide range of human rights issues and been a proponent of taking an integrated approach to human rights and recognizing the relationship between national security and economic, social, and political rights. He also has played a leading role in implementing Secretary Clinton's vision for internet freedom and often speaks on the topic of the role of the internet in advancing human rights and helping people build sustainable democracies, which we've all seen. Assistant Secretary Posner has participated in a number of strategic dialogues, probably too many to mention, but those include the strategic dialogue with civil society, which is designed to give civil society a stronger voice in shaping the political decision-making process. He's also been engaged in the voluntary principles in security and human rights and is a key negotiator in the annual U.S.-China Human Rights Dialogue. Prior to joining the State Department, Mr. Posner was the Executive Director and President of Human Rights First, where he worked on refugee protection and challenging crimes against humanity, among other issues. Prior to his time at Human Rights First, Assistant Secretary Posner was a practicing attorney in Chicago. He lectured for several years at Yale Law School and was a visiting lecturer at Columbia University Law School. He received his J.D. from the University of California, Berkeley Law School in 1975, with distinction and honors in history from the University of Michigan, his B.A. from the University of Michigan with distinction and honors. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Assistant Secretary Michael Posner.
Thank you, Dana, for those kind words. It's really a pleasure, a real privilege to be here tonight to participate in this evening honoring Maria Otero, who is an old friend and who's now my boss. I first met Maria really in 30 years ago when I was working with her husband, Joe Eldridge, who's here, who's one of my heroes. Joe was running the Washington office on Latin America, and Joe and I were part of a pioneering generation trying to kind of make the human rights issue a mainstream issue in American politics, American foreign policy. Joe had been involved in Chile in the mid-'70s during the Pinochet years, had brought Senator Harkin and others down to raise concerns about that, and had founded the Washington Office on Latin America, which was then and is still one of the premier human rights organizations in the world. I worked with Joe on the disappearances in Argentina, on the human rights issues in El Salvador. Through his office, got involved in the tragic deaths of the 4 American missionaries, churchwomen in El Salvador. And I always knew that, and as I met Joe and I met Maria, that they were among and continue to be among the best of what this country represents, the best of public citizens who really not only care about important issues, but live their values and have dedicated their lives, each in a different way, to things that really matter to the world. And I knew from a distance about Maria's work with Acción, where she worked for 25 years, headed for 10 years, and was really a pioneer in a new development model, a sustainable model, making microfinance, making money available to poor people, to people, especially women, who were desirous of being engaged in an economy, but without the resources. A model that was sustainable because not only were loans made available, but they paid back those loans. There was a sense that this was really developing over a lot of hard work and a lot of years, a model that others would soon recognize and replicate. But in a funny way, our worlds were parallel but not connected. And I always would talk with Joe and with Maria and others about how it is that we were working in areas that each so important and each so connected, and yet the connections weren't being made. And my particular joy and pleasure over the last 3.5 years has been to work with Maria as we have worked as part of the Obama-Clinton administration in making the case and beginning to implement a strategy, a global strategy for the United States that explains and understands that we can't have development, we can't have security, we can't have human rights and democracy without recognizing the links and beginning to put those issues together in a coherent way. I came down here in February of 2009 to interview with Secretary Clinton. And it all came very quickly out of the blue within 2 or 3 days of first being contact. I'm sitting in the room with her, and she offered me the job to be the Assistant Secretary working on issues I've devoted most of my professional life to. I got home, back to New York, and I got a call that night. And I was thinking as I was coming back on the train, I wonder who's going to be my boss, who's going to be the undersecretary. And sure enough, I get a call, and Maria says, hey, you know, you might be wondering who's going to be the undersecretary, who you're going to be working for. I said, yeah, I've been thinking about that all day. And she said, it's me. And to me, that was the music to my ears. That was the best news possible, because I so admire and respect Maria as a human being, but also as a professional, somebody who's so dedicated and so committed. And I was convinced from day one that we would work together in ways that are innovative. And we've done that. And Maria's been a fantastic leader in our department. And she's done what we've done together, and what I'm so proud of is that we've taken a number of disparate issues: counterterrorism, work on law enforcement, work on civilian security, on refugees, and on human rights. We have, in a very practical way, and Maria has driven this process with great skill, found the links, found the reinforcing links that make this a coherent unit in the State Department in a way that it's never been. She's been a champion with us on a range of human rights issues, a champion in trying to bring the corporate sector in on issues like internet freedom, recognizing that corporations can both play an affirmative role in support of government, but that they also have responsibilities, and recognizing that a rights-respecting, a rights-oriented approach to development is really the way that we get sustainable stability in our own society and around the world. Secretary Clinton has spoken about this, and we have been privileged, really privileged, to be able to work under such inspired leadership as Hillary Clinton, who understands deeply the connection between development, the need for countries to have working judicial systems, to have accountability, to have transparency, to empower women, to have access to the internet, to have trade unions that function. So the work that I do on a daily basis trying to build those blocks is work that sustains not only democracy and human rights, but it sustains development in a way that everybody in this room and everybody connected to SID is working on every day. So I'm, again, extremely proud, privileged to be here honoring my good friend and boss, Maria Otero. I congratulate SID for everything you do, but I'm really thrilled and honored to be here recognizing and honoring my dear friend, Maria Otero. Thank you all.
I know that everybody here came for the speeches, but we're actually going to give you a chance to have some dinner and to actually talk to one another and network a little bit. And so we'll resume the program shortly. Take their seats. We'd like to resume the program. Could everyone please take their seats? So I hope everyone is enjoying the dinner and conversations, more importantly. At this time, I'd like to welcome Dr. Jim Boomgard. Jim Boomgard has worked at the forefront of economic development issues for more than 30 years and in more than 30 countries. A Michigan State University agriculture development economist by training, Jim has been a thinker and, more importantly, a doer, and now is a leader in our global development community. His work in Thailand and Indonesia on job creation, small enterprise development, and rural non-farm employment in the 1980s laid the intellectual groundwork for practical work on these subjects that continues to this very day. Jim led USAID's path-breaking micro-enterprise stock-taking study in 1988, and from 89 to 92 served as the director of the joint DAI-Accion Michigan State Gemini team that helped propel USAID to global leadership in the microenterprise field. Since that time, Jim has managed development projects, worked in commercial agribusiness, been involved in venture investing, private sector development, and 3 years ago became the CEO of DAI, one of the leading global companies in the international field, and of course one of our sponsors tonight. Jim was a founding member and now serves on the executive committee of the Coalition of International Development Companies, a group of more than 50 firms committed to advancing the role of the private sector in international development. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Jim Boomgard.
Oh, the lights are bright. Thank you, Dana. Very nice introduction. It's good. The lights are good because you can't really see how many people are here tonight. So a duck walks into a drugstore. No, I'm really not going to tell that joke. The SID-Washington Award for Leadership and Development is a prestigious honor. The list of past award winners, which is in your program, is impressive. And tonight, Maria Otero's name is added to the list, and in my opinion, very rightly so. Some have suggested that Maria earned this recognition because she is the highest-ranking Latina in the history of the State Department, who has served for 4 years and now leads on matters that are weighty, complex, and important. They're partially correct. Others may think that Maria is the most powerful, influential, and best-looking person with a recognizable name that Sid could find who happened to be free tonight, 6 days before Christmas, during the busiest social week of the year. These cynics are undoubtedly wrong. A few others, I know at least 3 at the DAI tables, are hoping that through this accolade, there might be a chance that Maria introduces them to her good friend, George Clooney. And they, like Maria, will have their picture taken with George at the White House and pushed out over the entire World Wide Web. There's nothing wrong with vicarious living in moderation. While I'm open to the Clooney prospect myself, I have a slightly different take. Maria earned this leadership in development honor the old-fashioned way, by leading in the field of development. Maria's leadership in the microfinance field in the late 80s and early 90s was pivotal. She was the leader that microfinance needed at the time, and she stepped forward with grace, courage, and an unwavering commitment to the underprivileged and underserved to create a path that others were inspired to follow. In my view, the verdict on this award was in about 1992, well before she became president of Accion or appointed to public service in the State Department. The 80s are a bit of a blur for many of us, but let me take you back to 1988. The Soviet Union began withdrawing from 8 years of fighting in Afghanistan. James Hansen, a NASA scientist, testified to the Senate that man-made global warming had begun. The Iran-Iraq war ended with an estimated 1 million people lost. Benazir Bhutto was sworn in as Prime Minister of Pakistan. George Michael's Faith was the Billboard #1 song. The duck joke was named the funniest joke of the year, and I met and began a long friendship with Maria. I think we connected in part because we both had recently returned from the field. Maria from Honduras, and me from Indonesia. And we were in the midst of the inevitable struggles to reconcile the work and lives we had overseas with the very different challenges faced in finding relevance in Washington. During the next few years, I had the opportunity to watch Maria work. While I could not have anticipated that we would be here tonight, it did not take long to recognize that she had special talents, determination, spunk, charisma, and a natural leadership style that would forever change the people she touched, and in very real ways, the evolutionary course of microfinance. Now, this is not the time, I don't think, for an extended discussion or a dissertation on the history of microfinance, which began, I think, in 1897 in the village banks in Indonesia. But to understand Maria's leadership contributions, a little context is required. In the late 1980s, the word microfinance was relatively new. Like the proverbial elephant, microfinance meant many different things to many different people. Like a newly minted rescue dog, it resulted from mostly involuntary combination of strange bedfellows of different breeds. And like modern American politics, from its inception, it was hopelessly ideologically divided. There were 3 tribes in the microfinance world. There was the poverty clan, the enterprise fraternity, and the development finance school. All 3 groups had a great deal to offer, but considerable time and energy was spent defending turf rather than on building best practice from common ground. The field was also geographically insulated. Indonesia, Bangladesh, and South and Central America were all locations of tremendous experience, insight, innovation, and real success. But these places were competing, not collaborating. "That won't work here" was frequently heard as an excuse that reinforced geographic insulation. The field was also institutionally divided. There was the perennial conference rivalry between the nonprofits and the for-profits. There were competing universities, and there were the old guard battling the new kids on the block. People reacted to these fissures, the ideological, the geographic, and the institutional, by doing what people do. Some took up arms and fought, mostly for resources. Some buried their heads in their own sands, and a very few, searched to find common ground and a way forward. Maria came from the poverty camp, one of the pioneers of group lending for the poor. She was a card-carrying member of the Central and South American clan. She was a senior leader of the largest US-based specialized nonprofit microfinance institution, Acción. But she did not succumb to the comforts of her home turf. She approached the world with eyes wide open. She listened to new ideas and worked to understand what these ideas meant. She traveled and insisted that her people travel to see new things, experience new realities, and challenge the stereotypes of difference. They immersed themselves, not just for days, sometimes for months. She understood that an open mind did not compromise her values or her conviction to the mission of expanding access to financial services. Maria Otero pioneered a path that helped turn differences into strengths. She wrote about it. She contributed at meetings, seminars, and conferences. She opened the minds of people inside and outside of her own tribe. She was a relentless force of change. Maria's leadership was transformative and pivotal. She helped open up a new world of microfinance that was built from the best that all the competing camps had to offer. The new world was committed to reaching the poor, offering products and services that they, as customers, not beneficiaries, valued, achieving massive scale that was only possible through commercial viability, not donor dependence, and ensuring sustainability by integrating microfinance with financial markets. Leaders have been described throughout history in every way imaginable as dictators, demagogues, commanders, bosses, benefactors, guardians, coaches, pastors, and trailblazers. When it comes right down to it, a leader is someone people will follow. Jim Howden, a friend and author of the book The Art of Engagement and CEO of Root Learning, posits that people follow only if the leader satisfies their need for engagement. According to Jim, people want to be part of something big. People want to feel a sense of belonging. People want to go on a meaningful journey, and people want to know that their contributions make a significant difference. Maria's leadership in microfinance did exactly that. She played a central and critical role in blazing a trail that brought people together, helping them believe that they were part of something big, motivating them to travel together on a meaningful journey, and inspiring them that together we could make a significant difference. Lao Tzu, the 6th century Chinese philosopher, wrote that a leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, "We did it ourselves." Maria would never tell the story of her contribution to the microfinance field as the way I've described it this evening. There are others who would portray their own roles or the work of their friends as more central to the transformation of the field. And that's okay. Change never involves just one person. There's plenty of credit to go around. But I was there. I saw her work, her intellect, her charm, her charisma, and her commitment. I watched and I learned and I smiled. My own theory of change management at the time was to convene a meeting, tell a joke, and then tell people to shut up and row. We were fortunate that Maria was close by. We give awards for many reasons. They're partly made to honor the recipient. Individual contributions deserve to be recognized. And Maria, I hope you spend at least a few minutes savoring this one. You have earned this award and deserve to be acknowledged for your leadership and development. But more importantly, we believe that awards have a Darwinian influence. We single out success in the hope that it will inspire others to learn and follow. The examples you set, your commitment to your values, and your drive and your openness to seek out, understand, and then to build on the best that everyone has to offer is a rare and valuable leadership gift. We will all be better off if this award inspires even one person to follow your lead. Thank you very much. Congratulations again, Maria. Happy holidays to all of you.
Thank you, Jim, for those lovely remarks. Next, I'd like to welcome Elizabeth Rhine, who's the Managing Director at the Center for Financial Inclusion at Axion International. She works to bring together leaders in financial services to address challenges facing the microfinance industry today. She's the co-creator of the SMART campaign for client protection in microfinance. As Senior Vice President of Axion from 2000 to 2008, Ms. Rhine led Axion's initial entry into Africa and India and directed the organization's research efforts to develop new financial products and managed Axion's publications and educational activities. Ms. Rhine has published numerous articles and 5 books on microfinance, including The New World of Microenterprise Finance, Building Healthy Financial Institutions for the Poor, co-edited with our honoree tonight, Undersecretary Maria Otero. Ladies and gentlemen, Elizabeth Rhine.
You were right, Jim. It's bright. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much to SID for giving me this privilege to talk about two things that are extremely dear to me, Maria Otero and microfinance, and also the great joy of sharing the stage with my old friend, Jim Boomgard. I've been asked to squeeze 25 years of outstanding accomplishment and great friendship into 6 minutes. I don't know, it's crazy. Just after I met Maria, and that was at the same time as Jim. Jim, Maria, and I, we all met at the same time, all back from living overseas. And I started working at USAID. I was a brand new aid staffer, and I was sent to face a room full of cranky NGO representatives. And you know how cranky NGO representatives can be when faced with a USAID bureaucrat. I was definitely over my head. There was one sweet old man, he would not stop droning. And Maria, whom I'd barely met, was back in the back of the room, and she caught my eye, and she went, I didn't know what to do. How could I interrupt this sweet old man politely? He kept going, and I started getting anxious. Then Maria caught my eye again, and this time she went. So I took the cue, and I've been taking cues from Maria ever since, and I know she'll stop me if I go on too long now. Maria taught me a lot, especially about leadership, and I think probably about diplomacy too. And one of those things is that it takes all of your being. It takes heart, it takes brains, and it takes body. On the heart side, I think what makes Maria so special is an uncanny talent she has for creating an immediate connection with people, whether it's a fish seller in a market in Mozambique, or Richard Gere, or George Clooney. But her leadership even involved body, and by that I mean dancing. Maria is a dancing fool. She pulled us all onto the dance floor at Acción at every opportunity, and you may think that's just trivial, but what's going on there is enabling everyone at Acción to see themselves as part of a vibrant and life-affirming and positive enterprise, and that spirit carried over into the work that we did. I think if Maria has a Christmas wish for the US government, it's probably for more dancing at the State Department. Jim set the stage in talking about Maria's early contributions to microfinance, and let me just take a moment to highlight her contributions as CEO of Acción during the decade from 2000 to 2010. Maria transformed Acción from a Latin American-only operation into a truly global organization. And when I consider that, I think that that is one of the things that prepared her best for working at the State Department. She knew her home region like the back of her hand, and that enabled her to use that grounding as a springboard to connect with new partners in other parts of the world, in Africa, in India, and China. Thanks to Maria's leadership and her determination in the face of board members who were recalcitrant, staff members who only knew how to speak Spanish, and other obstacles, she saw her way clear to move Acción into its global status today, and today it works in 29 countries around the world. One of the things that Maria worked on very early and was really spearheading was the creation of Acción Investments in Microfinance, which is one of the first microfinance equity funds of any scale. And this is a good time to talk about that because last month Acción Investments just closed after 10 years. It provided a positive and attractive return to investors and to Acción. Acción is then able to use those proceeds to work on developing microfinance institutions in unserved, difficult, and very poor places. places like Cameroon, Lagos, Nigeria, and Bihar, India. That ability to take equity investments, make money from microfinance, and channel it again into the field and to serving more people is why the commercial model of microfinance that was pioneered by Accion really under Maria's leadership, that's why it's so important. And when you think about that going on during that period, one of the things that microfinance commercial model laid the groundwork for is today's impact investing world, which is taking off so much. Maria was always an industry builder. She loved Accion, but I think she loved the industry of microfinance still more. She was great at spotting needs and quickly devising very creative responses. For example, she noticed that the CEOs of microfinance institutions around the world needed professional development, and what she did next was to create an executive education program for them, which is still going at Harvard Business School. She saw that equity investors in microfinance needed to develop a set of common best practices as they develop their industry, and she created a forum for that, the Council of Microfinance Equity Funds. She always had the true north in mind as she negotiated through all this, that the microfinance movement was about creating global social enterprises with the conviction that the poor are valued customers and not recipients of charity, which I think is one of the fundamental tenets and fundamental contributions to development that microfinance has made. Most meaningful for me, recently, she helped launch the Center for Financial Inclusion, which I now run. We're an action tank that is devoted to helping microfinance shape its future. And please forgive me for a moment just to say that what we are most excited about is the Smart Campaign for Client Protection, which Maria encouraged. It's a campaign that's making client protection part of the DNA of microfinance. This is very important work. It's the most important, I think, work going on in microfinance right now, and is what we are developing, what we hope will be a fair trademark for microfinance. Today, when we look to the future of microfinance, we see that it's growing more diverse and expansive, new ranges of services. What really has been created through microfinance organizations like Accion, through the efforts of Maria and the other pioneers in the field, is an amazing platform for connecting with the world's poor. And on that platform, there is now a burst of innovation that's going on. It's a time of really great opportunity in the field, and that's no small part thanks to the work that Maria has done over her lifetime. I just want to end on a personal note. Maria has a wonderful Bolivian-American family, and they, as well as her husband Joe Eldridge and her son Justin, as well as her other children who are not here, unfortunately, tonight, David and Anna. They are really the source of the love, the laughter, and the leadership that shines through in all aspects of Maria's work. That family recently experienced the loss of a beloved member, and that's why I'm especially happy to have this chance tonight to celebrate just how much any life that is well lived, and Maria's in particular, matters to the people around the world that she has sought to serve, and matters just as much to the friends and colleagues like me who have been blessed to travel the road with her. Thanks.
Good evening. I'm here to introduce Maria Otero. First of all, thanks, Dan, for the honor of being this year's gala chair. I'm particularly pleased by my appointment because I get to actually present the award to Maria, whom, in addition to being the tremendously accomplished professional that she is and that you've all heard about, is part of a family near and dear to my heart. One who knows the Otero family might say that they are too heartwarming as King Midas is to gold. They just make people around them feel well. Born in La Paz, Bolivia, Maria Otero is currently the highest-ranking Hispanic official at the State Department and the first Latina undersecretary in its history. Mrs. Otero was formerly the president and CEO of Acción International, a pioneer and leader in economic development, working in 25 countries around the globe. She is recognized as one of the world's leading experts on inclusive economic growth, women's issues, and international development. Prior to Acción, Ms. Otero was the economist for Latin America for the Women in Development Office at USAID. She also served for 5 years at the Center for Development and Population Activities. President Clinton appointed Mrs. Otero to the board of the United States Institute of Peace in 2000, a position that she held for 8 years, including one term as vice chair of the board. In June 2006, Mrs. Otero was appointed by UN Secretary General Kofi Annan to the UN Advisors Group on Inclusive Financial Sectors. She was an adjunct professor at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies in Washington, D.C., before joining the State Department. Maria Otero was sworn in as Undersecretary of State on August 10, 2009. She oversees and coordinates U.S. foreign relations on the spectrum of civilian security issues across the globe, including democracy, human rights, population, refugees, trafficking in persons, rule of law, counter-narcotics, crisis prevention and response, global criminal justice, and countering violent extremism. She also serves as the President's Special Representative for Tibetan issues. Of her many accomplishments, the following are some of the key initiatives she has worked on in her capacity at the State Department: a sustained diplomatic engagement on water security, launch and leadership of the Open Government Partnership, streamlined trafficking in persons into U.S. foreign policy priorities, and development of a global youth policy that integrates youth perspectives and voices into U.S. policy priorities. Mrs. Otero has chaired the board of Bread for the World and also served on the boards of the Calvert Foundation, Public Welfare Foundation, the Inter-American Foundation, and BRAC Holding of Bangladesh. She is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Mrs. Otero's awards and recognition include selection by Newsweek in October 2005 as one of the United States' 20 most influential women, Hispanic Business Magazine's Elite Women of 2007, Notre Dame University's Distinguished Service in Latin America Award, and the Ellis Island Medal of Honor. Mrs. Otero holds an MA in Literature from the University of Maryland, an MA in International Relations from Johns Hopkins University, and an honorary doctorate of Humane Letters from Dartmouth College. On behalf of the Washington chapter of the Society for International Development, it is my honor to present Maria Otero with the SID-Washington Award for Leadership in Development for her profound contributions to the international development community. Please.
Thank you, Ignacio, for that wonderful introduction. It is such an honor to receive this award. It's such a privilege to walk in the footsteps of those that were honored before me. Jim is here, dear friend Aaron Williams as well, and others that have been also honored, Senator Lugar and Kerry, Andrew Natsios, and others that have been here. I want to especially thank the Society for International Development for really this humbling evening and all the generous statements from friends and colleagues that we have just heard. I am so grateful. Jim and Beth have been part of my journey in all the work that I have done in microfinance, work that I could have never done without them. And to have them here honoring me this way is just so meaningful to me. I had to work pretty hard to keep Jim in line. That was as he mentioned, but I think we made some progress, actually. I, of course, also want to thank my husband, Joe Eldridge. As you heard earlier from Mike Posner, Joe is a lifelong human rights advocate, and his dedication and his commitment and his principled way of approaching the work that he did has clearly not only made a difference in the lives of so many people, but it has also served as an example for me and for our children, Justin, who is here, and David and Anna, who are not. So thank you, Joe. Stand up, Joe. And of course, I can't go anywhere without thanking my extraordinary mother, Maria Teresa, mother to 9 of us. She is the first woman who showed me, through mind, body, and soul, that we can do anything that we set out to do. As Beth mentioned earlier, our family suffered a great loss this last week. It's the passing of my younger brother, Pablo, a great man. So I want to take a moment tonight, this afternoon, this evening, to honor his memory and to honor the support and the help and the love that he gave me through my life. I want to take this award in his honor. And I want to tell you that there is nothing more comforting than to be here tonight in my community, my development community, the people that I've worked with, the faces that I have known for decades, to not only be able to give me comfort, but to affirm what is important in life and the value that we give each one that crosses our path. So thank you for being here tonight. Let me say a little bit about myself. You know, I think as we think about our professional lives, my professional life began not too far from here at the University of Maryland, where I was studying a topic that was very close to my heart, British Romantic literature. Yep, I was in love with John Keats, and there was nothing anybody could do about that. So I launched my career with a master's in British Romantic literature, a thesis on John Keats's poetic development under my arm, and moved forward towards the world with that in my hand. You can imagine how useful that was, right? But at some point in my 20s, I really felt almost a calling to go back to serve in the land of my childhood. Born in Bolivia, my roots were really in Latin America. So after taking a stint of 2 years at Johns Hopkins SIDE so that I could learn a thing or two about development, I began my career and I started working at Acción International I worked there for almost 25 years, and my work began in Honduras, where I lived, the whole family lived for 3 years. It was at this time, as Jim was saying, that this phenomenon of microfinance was beginning to take traditional notions about banking and begin to turn them into their heads. What Acción was doing was trying to reach people who were living in the sprawling cities in Latin America initially. They were newly arrived migrants. They had no education. They had few skills. They had no connections. They had no safety nets. And they tried to survive in those cities. There were also some that lived off the land in rural areas or in small towns that had little infrastructure. I think all of you know the people that I'm talking about because they're the same people that you are trying to work with. But what Acción recognized early on was that in the absence of employment, these men and women could start their own business to support their families. They needed working capital to do this, and they needed a supportive loan officer or someone who could help them guide them in their work. Now, this seems like such an obvious notion right now that microfinance has matured and it has moved across the world. But in those early days, no one thought that we were being innovative with this. They just thought that we were being crazy trying to do this work. I'm sure there are many of you here that have experienced that also in your own work. But it wasn't long before Acción and other pioneers in the field of microfinance started to see the poor through a new lens. They were no longer helpless. We began to see them as people who were resourceful, who were creative, and who were determined. Since those days, early on, which Jim and Beth have described, today an estimated 100 million plus people around the world have gained access to microcredit, and many millions more have their own savings accounts. With credits and savings, microfinance is expanding to include other financial services that we all have access to and that the poor also deserve access to, whether that's remittances or housing loans or insurance. All of these are becoming expansive enough so that we are now, after decades of doing this work, moving towards a trend of full financial inclusion, in which all people have access to a suite of productive, tailored financial products that are going to help them work themselves out of poverty. But this, as I said, this phenomenon, banking for the poor, did not happen overnight. In fact, these words, banking and poor, had hardly been placed in the same sentence before. Part of what broke the mold, allowing microfinance to be not only successful, but also sustainable, as Mike Posner mentioned, was this new lending methodology that used character as a collateral. Now, I want to emphasize this point because I think it's especially important in the context of what we all do in development. As development professionals, we are individuals who are committed to improving the lives of those less fortunate than us, but we all understand that the character of the poor is not something to be marginalized or to be taken for granted. SID's member organizations have created global impact in their work because obviously of the many smart people that are here in this room, no doubt. But your impact comes from a similar recognition of the innate potential, dignity, and value of every person, whether it's a poor vendor, a rural farmer, a new citizen, a recent immigrant, whoever. In other words, we all believe in using character as collateral. We believe that the determination and the creativity and the hard work of millions who lack access must be met by our own determination to impact on the laws, the regulations, the institutions that prevent economic empowerment from reaching the majority. Now, as I moved from Acción to the State Department, I took many lessons from my work in my time in microfinance and in international development. Here are three. The first one is that there is nothing micro about the human spirit. The poor and the disenfranchised are not hopeless, and they are also not helpless. They're vulnerable, yes, they are. But with the right policies, with the right tools, poor men and women can create better lives for themselves, and they can become active participants in their own societies, and hopefully subjects of their own destiny. The second lesson is that building strong local institutions, public, private, nonprofit, is essential if the fabric of vital democracy and sustainable development is going to take hold. The third lesson that I have learned about our impact in the world is a reflection of our willingness to iterate, to self-correct, to recognize that none of us are doing things quite right yet. If we were, we would have solved the problems of the world already. So we have to continue being critically reflective, improving, and critically reflective again. And this was one lesson that Acción taught me year after year. And it's these lessons with the ones that I began my tenure as Undersecretary of State. First, I was Undersecretary for Democracy and Global Affairs, and then Secretary Clinton asked me to become Undersecretary for Civilian Security, Democracy, and Human Rights, a larger set of responsibilities. When I look back at that time, almost 4 years ago, I felt compelled to respond to Secretary Clinton's call and to her vision for the positive role that America could play in the world. It was a vision in which the United States reached out to partners across the world just as that, as partners. It was a vision in which we would work not just with governments and bilateral relationships, but with international organizations, with the United Nations, with religious groups, with all parts of civil society. And it's a vision that seeks to elevate our government's civilian power to help address the challenges around the world. This was a vision that I wanted to help deliver. So armed with my lessons from Acción and from the years that I spent in microfinance, I committed myself to better understand how we as government can help other governments protect their citizens, protect their vulnerable populations from the threats that they encounter every day. And these threats that they encounter are very real. Most of these threats stem from the existence of weak democracies around the world, from human rights violations, especially among vulnerable populations, for example, gender-based violence, from the ravages of displacement and refugee life, which many of you know about, from modern-day slave traders, from lack of access to resources such as water, from transnational criminal organizations that are eating into the fabric of societies, from violent extremism that is absorbing and attracting youth around the world, and from abusive governments themselves. These threats, which are realities in many countries, are becoming more prevalent. They are becoming more dangerous and more widespread. One of the things that I have valued the most in being an undersecretary, in addition to being having an expediter at every airport, is that in my travels to nearly 50 countries, I have had the chance to meet with the people who take on the fight against these threats. When I'm sitting across LGBT defenders in Uganda or in Honduras, and I am addressing the terrible plight that they face. When I am talking to a young girl in Nepal or in Thailand who is recovered from being trafficked and is only 15 years old. When I'm debating with youth representatives in Nigeria who question the value of elections or of participating in them. When I'm speaking with elected leaders in a refugee camp, whether it's Somalians, Burmese, Syrians, people who are yearning for their personal dignity, which has been crushed by their displacement. When I'm meeting with religious leaders in Pakistan or Tunisia or Indonesia or Kenya, people who are seeking to end conflict or to mitigate it. All these meetings have helped me understand how our government can assist and have therefore informed and shaped our policies. In my job as Undersecretary of Civilian Security, Democracy, and Human Rights, I oversee the work of 8 bureaus and offices, over close to $5 billion. All of their efforts are grounded in one common understanding. We will only achieve sustainable peace when we resolve the underlying grievances of individuals, and we must continue to build institutions inside and outside government that will protect individuals, not just today, but for generations. It is something that also acknowledges that conflict and crisis are present in many countries around the world, and we have a moral, an economic, and a political imperative to help prevent conflict and to lessen its occurrence. This is no easy task. You all know that as well as I do. Civil society knows this very well as well. Earlier this month, I participated in a roundtable with Secretary Clinton and embattled civil society activists from across Europe. Most of them were from former Soviet republics. This was in Dublin, where the Secretary was recently at the OSCE ministerial meetings. These human rights defenders spoke of the challenges they continue to face as they strive to create a space in which they can operate freely. Civil society, indeed, around the world still confronts harassment, intimidation, imprisonment, repressive legislation, and in some cases, torture, as they try to uphold the fundamental freedoms for all citizens. It's our responsibility to help them in that fight. In our work at the Department of State, and the part that we are working on, we're supporting the protection of individuals and ultimately the stability of nations. Each of the elements that we address is one piece in the puzzle that helps governments create more just societies for their people. And I want to highlight that we work closely with AID because AID is a critical player in this important work. It implements a wide range of programs that strengthens democracies. It's a partner that looks at all of these areas and knows that in order for development to take place, these pieces have to be in place as well. Ultimately, over the last 4 years, we believe we have been fulfilling Secretary Clinton's vision of a world in which, as she has said very often, every person has the opportunity to live up to his or her God-given potential. Our goal is to help build just societies grounded in democratic principles that guarantee respect for human rights, provide protection for individuals, and apply the rule of law. In this regard, I have so much valued being able to represent our government in meetings with high-level officials from other governments, because this has been an opportunity for me to encourage, to urge, to pressure, to insist, to demand that they respect the fundamental freedoms of their people, that they uphold the rule of law, that they ensure that their police are well-trained, that they empower the youth and women, that they punish those that are committing crimes against humanity, and much more. In this process of doing the work of the State Department and doing the work of Acción, I have had the privilege of seeing my two worlds, that of development and microfinance, and that of enhancing the fundamental rights of individuals come together. And I have seen how development and diplomacy working together can draw these two worlds closer. I have to say that I am proud of the achievements that we have made in the last 4 years and of the advances that I have witnessed in my career in international development. Every day when I have worked, I have been motivated and energized by the people in this room, by the people that are doing this kind of work, the people who are dedicating their lives in order to support those that are less fortunate and more vulnerable, to the humble of the earth. And every day of my career, I have been grateful that I could serve those that need the help the most. John Keats once wrote, I am certain of nothing but the holiness of the heart's affections and the truth of imagination. I believe that to be true. We came up with microfinance, and it is helping more than 100 million people and their families. Together, we are changing our foreign policy to elevate economic development and the basic rights of individuals. And as a country, we are engaging with the world as never before. What will we, all of us in this room, come up with next? It is up to us. Let us continue the good work, and thank you so much for this award. Thank you.
Thank you, Undersecretary Otero, and thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. We really appreciate your support. We look forward to working with you in the coming year. We promised at the top of the evening that we would draw 2 names to receive complimentary annual conference passes, and those will go, oh, these are from the same company, I'm sorry. I thought I drew them randomly. So Christine Allison from JBS, and Lynn Losert from JBS also. Sorry. So for more information, see Courtney Biergard, who's over here, or you can check at one of the registration desks. Thank you to everybody for being here tonight.